When the US government announces a 15% tariff on foreign goods, politicians often say the foreign country will pay.
President Trump says he will raise to 15%.
Today, President Trump raised his new global tariffs to 15%.
Trump, 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 Trump.
China first, I'm putting Michigan first, and I'm putting America first.
That is a powerful line. It is also misleading because tariffs do not eliminate costs, they redistribute them. And the data is clearer than the rhetoric. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. When a product crosses a border, the importing country may impose a fee, typically calculated as a percentage of the product's value. If a company imports $1,000 worth of components and a 15% tariff applies, it must pay $150 before those goods can enter the domestic market. That payment is made by the importer, not by the foreign government. The revenue goes to the government imposing the tariff. That is not theory, that is how customs systems operate globally. At the border, the importer pays, but the more important question is, who ultimately bears the burden? This is where empirical evidence matters. A 2019 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research examined U.S. tariff data during the 2018 to 2019 trade tensions. Its conclusion was direct. Import prices rose almost 1-for-1 with the tariffs imposed. Foreign exporters did not significantly lower their prices to offset the tariff. The initial burden fell on U.S. importers. Research from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York reached a similar conclusion. They estimated that tariffs increase cost for the average U.S. household by hundreds of dollars per year. So we have a starting point. Importers pay first, but the burden does not stop there. When input costs rise, companies respond. They can raise prices, they can accept lower profit margins, they can shift suppliers, or they can manufacture locally. Which path they choose depends on competition. If a company operates in a concentrated market with pricing power, it is more likely to pass costs on to consumers. If competition is intense, margins compress instead. The Congressional Budget Office has noted that tariffs often function like excise taxes, meaning the burden spreads across consumers and shareholders. Tariffs change incentives. They do not freeze them. In theory, exporters can lower prices to maintain access to large markets. In practice, large-scale data suggests this effect is limited. The Peterson Institute for International Economics found that foreign exporters absorbed only a small share of recent tariff costs. Most of the burden appeared in higher import prices. Producers can only absorb costs if margins allow, and when margins compress too far, supply chains shift or investment slows. Markets adapt, but they do not erase cost. In many sectors, consumers ultimately bear a significant share of the burden. Federal Reserve research found high pass-through rates in manufacturing inputs and consumer goods. Over time, this functions similarly to a consumption tax. It may not appear as a separate line item on a receipt, but it affects final prices. Because the cost is dispersed across millions of transactions, it often feels gradual. Diffuse costs rarely generate immediate backlash. That is part of the political logic. If you find breakdowns like this useful, where we look past the headlines and examine the incentives underneath, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Tariffs do not operate in isolation. Countries can respond to tariffs by adjusting their exchange rate. If the exporting country's currency weakens, part of the tariff impact may be offset. But research shows exchange rate movements rarely neutralize the full effect. They may soften it, they rarely eliminate it. Trade policy interacts with currency markets, capital flows, and supply chain decisions. This is why outcomes vary across industries and over time. Despite economic complexity, tariffs remain politically appealing. They are visible, they are easy to explain, they generate government revenue, and their benefits are concentrated. A protected industry can clearly identify its gains. The costs, however, are dispersed across millions of consumers. This dynamic is well understood in political economy. Policies with concentrated benefits and diffuse costs tend to persist because the beneficiaries are organized and the payers are scattered. Tariffs fit that structure precisely. The evidence from trade data and central bank research points in the same direction. Tariffs do not make foreign governments send checks, they raise costs within the importing economy. These costs are redistributed across businesses, consumers, and shareholders. And who ultimately carries them depends on incentives, market structure, and competitive dynamics. It is important to acknowledge that tariffs do not always produce identical outcomes. In rare cases, particularly when a large economy imposes tariffs on a smaller trading partner, foreign exporters may absorb a greater share of the cost to preserve access to the market. Some economists also argue that tariffs can improve a country's terms of trade under specific conditions or serve strategic objectives such as national security or industrial policy. But these are conditional scenarios. In most modern trade disputes, especially among large economies, empirical evidence shows that a substantial share of the burden remains within the importing country. In conclusion, tariffs are not paid by foreign governments. They're paid first by domestic importers and ultimately distributed across businesses and consumers.